All right. Hello to everybody that is tuning in for another episode with the Coach's Corner. I hope everybody's had a great week and we have a wonderful episode for all of you tuning in. I'm going to say a couple words and then disappear. If you would like to ask any questions, feel free to do so. Just pop them in the chat box. Please, please, please ask away. We will try to cover everything. If not, head on over to the Coach's Corner, and they are wonderful. They will be sure to answer any unanswered questions. That being said, I'm going to disappear. I'm handing this off to your grace. Thorfinn, here we go.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to SCA Coach's Corner. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the ideas of why we fight in crown tournaments and why we don't. And all of our guests tonight are going to be kind of just carrying on a conversation about this. We've all got a beer, and it's going to be just a fun evening. We've got Duke Brian of Tarragon tonight, Duke Ragnavldr, Duke Brannos, Duke Sean will be joining us, Viscount Tristan, and myself, Duke Thorfinn. With that, let's does anyone want to jump in first off and say what what their first reason was that they got it? I think you're there. You go.
Nobody jump up right ahead of anybody else. It's such a courteous group.
Yeah.
I would say that it seems like a logical progression as you increase in your skill, that you fight for a while, you probably get knighted. I know in my case, a lot of people said, you're very skilled. You really need to reign. You should go and win a crown or win a royal tournament. At the time, North Shield was a principality, so we had two royal tournaments available to us: Mid-Realm Crown as well as North Shield Coronet Tournament. And your supporters, your friends, you can do this. You should go do it. There's that initial pressure there, like it's the next logical thing that you do as you increase in your skill. And in many cases for people, in that skill range, it does seem like a logical next thing to do. Like, you've proven that you can go win tournaments, you can win small tournaments, you can win bigger tournaments. Then the next thing is to go win that larger tournament, kind of like an athlete would go to the Olympic Games if they were regional or state champion or national champions. It seems like the next logical thing. So that was my initial exposure to the expectation of, well, it's the next rung on the ladder. As you go higher and higher, that seems like the logical way to do it. Would you guys see that as you have a similar experience?
I completely agree with that. That's what thinking back on it, that's what it felt like to me. It was just what you did. You went and fought in crown next. I was blessed to have people around me who had also served and had already won crowns. So it wasn't very alien to me either. I'd been to crowns with them. I had served royalty. I had been knighted. So it all just sort of fit. The crowns I went to before that, though, were a lot more, like you said, Tristan, where it's just like your skill levels reached a certain point, so you go to crown. I know Brannos created the TOCs to help deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, I won my first crown in '84. And at that time, the Kingdom of Atenvelt was very, very broad. It went from the Canadian border all the way to the Mexican border, 2 states wide. And the groups were small and spread out. And for me, it was exposure. The ability to find a tournament or an opportunity with the broadest exposure to the broadest number of people with the broadest skills. Crown tournament was the place. So, you were, and I agree with what's been said so far, you're building on your skills, but that competitive nature that I think we all possess, and that want to actually continue to get better, the best way to do that was to actually go to crown and to compete. And I think one of the things I remember about the crowns back then was that very oftentimes there were additional things surrounding crown in terms of fighting opportunities. Sometimes the crown tournament was actually, we did it on a 2-day basis back then, where there was warm-ups and getting ready on Saturday. Crown tournament was actually fought on Sunday. So you had all that exposure time to train and work with other people in addition to actually fighting in the competition itself. So that was a little bit what drove me to participating in those from the start, and then continuing to go on to try to win them.
Yeah, that's interesting because we have some crowns like that as well. Our spring crowns are over Memorial Day weekend, so usually Saturday is our ANS Kingdom ANS, and the good part is anybody can show up and just fight all day. In fact, in my second crown, that's exactly what I did. I showed up that day, fought all of Saturday, and it wasn't like, crown to me at that point was just another tournament, so it was no big deal. Blew up my shoulders. Ragnavldr saved me by giving like deep tissue massage the night before so I could actually lift my arm above my head. It worked pretty well. So I still ended up legging most people and then hitting him. It was much easier. But but that's I think I really like the ones over the long weekend, and I think you're 100% right. There's like so much going on. It's just like a whole weekend of like people all together in a small space doing arts and sciences, doing pickup and fighting and helping each other. People just hanging out, talking that they don't want to fight that day. They're going to fight on Sunday, so they're prepping, and so I agree 100%. Sometimes on the crowns that are just one day, you're there, you're gone. You kind of miss that a little bit. It's like you got a job, you fly in Friday, or you go Friday night, you kind of prep Friday night, you get up in the morning, you set up your gear, you put your armor on, you get inspected, you do a couple pickups, and then you're in and you go. And at 5 o'clock, you win or lose, you got court, you got dinner, you got all this other stuff, and then the day's done, right? So I would agree 100%. I really enjoyed our spring crowns much more. And to tell you the truth, those are the only ones I ever competed in. It was our spring crowns because I had no want to be war king, specifically because I was war general for 6 or 7 years, and it was an incredible time. But I want to put up with crap that the war kings sometimes had to put up with, even though I had to as well sometimes.
Let me think about it for a second. I guess first off, I got to admit that there was really early on in my tournament culture idea that I was a bit ego driven. I wanted to, I thirsted for recognition and achievement, right? And so there was definitely that drive, that I guess that competitive drive to push me to do it then. But I also grew up in the West Kingdom, where we have a pretty weird tournament culture. We have massive tournaments, right? And so a lot of kingdoms don't have very big tournaments. Maybe 30 or 40 people would be considered large. We have like, at the time, maybe 75 to 100 people in the tournament. And the idea was that culturally was that if you're in the kingdom, you should fight in the crown tournament just so your voice is heard, right? So you're part of picking who's going to become the next king. And that was kind of what the mindset we all came from. Plus my kind of the guys that trained me they believe that, how do you get good at something? Well, you practice doing it. And the only way to practice being in tournaments is, well, fighting in them. And so that was kind of what drove us to do it when we first started, for sure. And I think that, as I got more recognition and also having achieved some serious tournaments, I changed the reasoning drastically, and we'll go into that later. But what caused me to keep doing it, that changed. So the drive was probably the first thing.
And I guess real quick, I kind of jumped over what drove me to do it. And I would agree. In the mid realm at the time, we had invitational crown lists. So our crowns were usually around between 80 and 90 people.
Right.
Because the unbelts would look at that list, and and if they were on the list, you felt pretty obligated to go. Otherwise, you may not be on the list next time.
Oh, I see. That's interesting. Yeah.
And so we had people at the time, we had North Shield and Eldamir. So there are times you're driving 14 hours, or more to somewhere to a crown tournament because your name was on a list. Not that you're really that interested in reigning, but you're prepared. That interested in being a knight.
Yeah, no, I get it. That would have been a big thing for me too. The same push, right?
So, and that's the reason why Ragnavldr said that I kind of took away. There was a misconception, but I essentially stopped posting the list. I still asked all the peers to write in people's names, but I didn't post it. I just asked those people who really wanted to fight in crown to write me, and I told them if they were on the list or not.
Oh, okay.
And so that's kind of how, and at the same time I did that, I created the TOC, where the people that really did want to get seen by knights had a place to go, where the knights were duty bound to essentially fight them and watch them and be there for them.
I only just found out about this idea that you had, the TOC thing, like last Monday or something. And I got to tell you, I think it's a great idea. I wish we would, have something like that out here. So that way people don't have the pressure of worrying about, their wins, losses, and crowns. Because guys that are, in that mid-range fighter, they're worried about every win, right? Because it's going to affect my, how long it takes me to get knighted and things like that. And that, which is like a road to failure. That kind of fear can lead to, real problems. But having a place where they can train with knights like that at a crown level kind of environment, I think is a really cool idea and a really great gift you guys that you gave your kingdom there. I think it's really cool.
So there was a question, what are the pros and cons of fighting in an open crown list like in the West? And Brian, can you answer that one?
I've not fought in another kingdom's crown list other than where I've lived. So I fought Atenveldt's crown lists while I was there, and then I fought in the East since we've lived in the East. I have to kind of think a little bit about, I think there's a lot of it, I think, depends upon what are you after for yourself and what are you trying to achieve. I think the idea that you can actually have an open list like they have in the West and offer it up to people that are willing to actually, put in the time and do what is necessary if you win the list. It's a bold thing. It's something that actually allows for competition to rise. On kind of a side note, I think one of the things that I've always struggled with a little bit is that the epitome of kind of our top level fighting is in our crown lists, but we truly don't have a national. And when you kind of think about it from a competitive perspective, a competitive fighter wants to go to the highest level that they possibly can, compete at that level, and potentially you win it, and now you've claimed victory at that level. But there is no national. And so crown is the closest thing to that. Even with some of the big lists that occur around, over the years, and some that folks have tried to really kick off to be at that level, there really is nothing that kind of hits that level in terms of the feeling that you get. And I'd say from a personal perspective, when you strike that final blow in the finals, that is, ego and all, that is a feeling. And it is something that I think once you feel it, you get pretty addicted to it. But there is nothing at that level beyond crown. And so I think that also kind of draws people. So when you get back to the question about an open list, I think it promotes more people being able to participate, thus hopefully increasing the competitiveness of it. But I don't know that I have much more to say on that particular item.
Well, Thorfinn,
go ahead. Brian, since you're the one answering that, we've got some people from other kingdoms who are not aware of what an open list is. Can you define that for them? What makes that different than what everybody else is?
Oh yeah. So, and I understand a few other kingdoms have done or have allowed for open situations, but effectively what it is that a fighter from another kingdom can come into the kingdom and participate in a list, and should they win, they then have to abide by whatever the kingdom rules are for the purposes of being king and queen during that period of time. But you are effectively saying, look, I'm willing to sign up to play this role in the kingdom for that period of time, even though I might live, theoretically in the other side of the country or, off the continent. That it's a unique item, but my understanding, West is open.
That's it.
No, Antir. I thought Antir was open as well because Uther won Antir.
Yeah,
on
until
tiers is semi-open, I suppose. Kjartan and Shea did an invitational a couple years ago. Uther went up 10 years ago and won up there. But the way that it's written in on tier is one or the two of the sovereign and consort has to live in on tier.
okay.
Whereas the West is it was open in that regard. But those are the only two that I know of that have any kind of stipulation written into their laws as far as, and it's basically, when we say open list, it means there's no residency requirement.
Right.
I think every other kingdom in the world has, some sort of, you have to live here for X number of months or a year or whatever before you can enter. So yeah, the West is, and Thorfinn can probably explain more the genesis of that. I mean, he and I have had some animated discussions about entering and not entering, and I have entered that list. So Thorfinn, if you want to kind of cover the general philosophy of that, I'd be happy to.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess part of what it is it's the hubris of the West is that we think we can have an open tournament and allow people to fight in it because we don't have to worry. We'll defend our tournament. But actually, the law is not that anyone can join the tournament. Okay, it's with the crown's permission, anyone can join the tournament, right? And so we have people come up, and traditionally it's not every crown that we have someone, but a lot of times we'll have like someone who's like maybe from Kaid or Aitenveld or local kingdoms, and they happen to be here on work or something, and they'll ask if they can fight in the crown tournament. Of course, they have to swear, an oath to fulfill the job. If they were to win. But again, like I said, it's not entirely like the idea that it's open, just anyone can just walk up. That's not the case. It's just that traditionally we allow people to do that. So unless they do something really egregious, we're going to probably allow it. So.
All right, I'm going to ask the hard question just because I like the hard questions. It's like, so there's Thorfinn knows right where I'm going to go here. So somebody from out of your kingdoms is in the quarterfinals. I've heard this a number of times where it's basically, you might want to think about this at this point.
It's funny, is that we've had guys go to the finals several times. We've never had someone win yet that from out of kingdom, but we've been one fight away from it, right? And this is a kind of off topic, but I think that the pros and cons are real serious when you get to that point, right? Yeah. Having the open tournament allows people to come in, but then you may have someone who doesn't really know anything about your kingdom or its people, right? So that could be problematic. Like his grace Sean knows people in the West really well. He comes here all the time, right? So he's a person that is really well known. So he wouldn't have the same stumbling blocks you would see as if somebody who came out from, Ethelmark, won our crown, has no idea even the ward structure or why anyone on our peerage list is even being discussed, can't name any of the baronies, right? And so those are things where you say to yourself, well, that's potential failure that we allow to have there, right? By letting people come in. And it hasn't happened yet. I suspect that if it ever does, we may have a sudden change of law afterwards, but we'll see. And I think that's, I guess the idea too is that it would drive the great fighters of the kingdom to come out and defend the crown, but that's not always the case either, right? So maybe that guy can't, he's off, he's got work, his work blew up and he's not going to have 4 months where he's able to do this type of stuff. And so it is kind of rolling the dice. And so so far we've rolled well, is all I'm saying.
And I'll jump in. I'll jump in there with my thoughts on that as a foreigner. I have a great deal of respect for the guys in the West. Brian is absolutely the core of who I am as a fighter. But I've had a lot of influence from Beck and Fabian and Uther and Jade and a lot of those guys. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for them. There's something about the West Kingdom. I mean, for me, it's where it all started. There's this sort of innocence and ignorance that still exists as like that has that direct tie to the very first event. And as a student of interkingdom anthropology as I am, that's something that is appealing to me as well. So there's the opportunity to be part of that. But make no mistake, I mean, I have made an earnest effort to win that list, and it's something that I would like to do. But as Thorfinn said, we go out there a lot, and and yes, it has not happened yet. But I think even everybody in the West knows that just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it can't happen. And there may be a law change after that. But personally, if I were to go to win West Crown, I don't want to be the guy that messed it up so bad that we say we're not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Right. You want to hope, right?
I'm going to do everything I can to respect the laws, customs, and traditions. And meanwhile, so I mean, I don't really have anything to prove, right? I mean, I can go fight with those guys in just about any list in the world. I can just go do pickups with any of those guys and have a great time and learn from them. But for me, being crown is the ultimate service to a kingdom.
Right.
We heard a lot that out here that, like I said, Sean's not really an example of this, but there's guys that are like, well, it's an open list, and it's on my bucket list. Like, there's the mountain right there. I want to climb it just because I can, right? And I think that's where if you're even entering the list with that mindset, you're already failing, right?
Right.
So I think that, and like I said, I don't really have that problem with you. I know that you care actually quite a bit.
I mean, in a lot of ways, it's something I would like to do. I mean, besides, like Brian was talking about, I mean, being able to contest yourself against the very best in the world. I mean, that's one of the reasons that all of us enter crown is for that contest. And yeah, I can get that anywhere. But for me, there's a lot of that desire for me to where I want to give back to a large group of people that have given so much to me.
All right, so let's get a couple more questions real quick, and then we'll look at getting back on topic. Ragnavldr, here's one. We don't do this much in the mid-realm at all, but the question was, I got to find it again, sorry. What's your thoughts on voting in crown? Entering crown to vote. In other words, I'm going to enter crown to make sure that, maybe some people don't win.
I have mixed feelings on that. Honestly, it comes across as really cocky. It is built on the assumption that I can win any fight I want, right? So I'm just going to sit here and do this. I think if you have a problem with somebody being in crown, then you should address the crown before crown is held. You shouldn't go drive somebody out of crown. And if you're going to fight in crown, I think you should fight in crown to win the crown. You are there to say that I want, for whatever my reasons are, I want to serve the kingdom in this way, so I'm going to fight in crown. But it feels cocky and selfish to me to step into the list with the sole purpose of removing somebody else when you didn't address it before the tournament with the sitting royalty. And if the sitting royalty did, and the royalty said, no, we want them in our crown, in a way, aren't you going against royalty?
Go ahead, Thorfinn.
This is actually a thing, right? So the crappy part about that is, what about all the fighters that you are fighting, knocking out of the tournament on the way to get to your goal person, right?
Yep.
Like, I have to stop Duke so-and-so from winning our tournament. But all of the people that would have been a very good example of royalty or have not achieved that yet, you're knocking out kind of just like, who cares? I have to stop this one thing. And it, like Ragnavldr says, it becomes so much about you at that point and your own personal agenda that you're actually not even taking into consideration all the people that swore that oath to be in that tournament, to do a good job, right? And that is a really awful. And then of course they lose after that, right? Then they have to lose 2 times. So then they switch to dagger and fishing tackle box, and then they get their asses kicked. Well, we don't have that. So
right.
I've always heard about this ducal prerogative where these guys can just leave tournaments, and it's almost like this amazing myth to me. I'm like, does that really happen out there? Right? But yeah,
the thing is that
actually
it's an every fighter prerogative.
Well, you
within
can
the rules, you can yield to anybody that you want to in any tournament at any time.
Yeah.
without any penalty. Like anybody can do that. You don't need to be a duke. So
no, I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
but the idea there used to be this idea that they had this ducal prerogative where dukes could enter and leave lists whenever they wanted. And dumb, right? But yeah, I think that's a really negative thing for the tournament. It's really like a cancerous thing. You don't want to have that in your tournament ruining it. And so my opinion is that, you know, if you're going to fight in that tournament, you should fight to do your best. So.
All right. So we got one more question to catch up on. Then we're going to shift back and ask Sean why he started fighting in Crown. And I think Tristan might have a better lead in. But this one's for Brian, since he's done this so many times. He's like, let's see. Did I already go back? Oh, yeah. Okay. I thought there was interesting from a couple of weeks back that a comment that not wanting to reign too many times in too short of a period of time, because it really can impact the culture of the kingdom. How often / rarely do you think somebody should reign?
So I'll give a little bit of background. I did my first 5 reigns in a row, and I wouldn't recommend it for a couple of reasons, but I also wouldn't have not done it. And there's a couple of reasons behind it. I think this goes a little bit back to this question of intention and what are you trying to do? You know, is your intention in going into Crown to be competitive and compete in a big tournament? Is your intention in Crown to go and become the king of a kingdom and then rule the kingdom and provide the service that's necessary there? And I think some people play around with that and say, oh, of course, you know, I'm here for both. But I think there's also times where for some people, it's all about the one and not about the other. And we, of course, see some pretty bad reigns at times because of that. We also see the other side of that equation. So here's the thing. Why did I do it? A little bit, one, it was because the opportunity presented itself and I could do it. But I also think that there was a lot going on in our kingdom at the time, because after my first reign and during my first reign was when the Outlands was in the midst of becoming its own kingdom and was breaking apart. And there was a lot of goings on around how the kingdoms were going to split and who was going to go with whom and how things were going to actually end up in this very large kingdom that, like I said at the start, went from the Canadian border all the way to the Mexican border. So when the final split came down to the way that it ended up, and Artemisia, what became Artemisia, was part of Atenveldt. And so we still had this kingdom that was now a set of states skinnier, but still going from border to border. Trelon and I decided that we were going to go for some back-to-back crowns, and we were trying to create a level of consistency and really start to create a feeling of kingdom amongst what was becoming this new kingdom of Atenveldt. And it was very helpful to do back-to-back reigns because we were able to set into motion laws and precedences and things that made sense to us at the time. And I'm sure there were some people that disagreed with it. There always are. But at that point in time, we were able to say, look, we can set up some traditions, award structures, laws, things that would last. And many of those things have lasted to this day. So and they became influential in how Artemisia turned into its own kingdom. And, I feel very good that it worked out that way. Here's the downside. When you reign back to back that many times in a row, it's one, expensive. Two, it's all you do. And it's all you do for 5 years. And at the time I was young. I had not a lot going on in my life with things that, a lot of people have to deal with kids and everything else. At that point, I could play SCA 24/7. It was awesome. It was great. And it all played in together. Why have I not done a bunch of back-to-back reigns since then? It's simply because it just doesn't make sense to you. You need a break. You need time. And I have come to find in the later years, I've gapped the reigns a little bit more and more and more. But part of that is because one, I feel like you've really got to want to be the king and reign over a kingdom and play that role. And if you're not willing to give that 100%, you shouldn't be you shouldn't be out there, because, and two reasons for that. I'm sorry to just keep going on and on here about it, but I feel pretty passionate about it. You have such an influence on how people are going to view the SCA. You know, all the new people that are just starting, all the people that have played for years and years, you are creating an atmosphere for them, and you're setting a tone that if you're not willing to be putting that 110% in on that aspect of it, you know, we already know you put in the 110% in, hopefully on the fighting part of it. But if you're not willing to put it in on the reigning part of it, then you got a problem. Because, you know, I've often asked the question, you know, people always talk about, okay, so how come there are so many people who will do the 2 reigns and then it's out? I would imagine for some of them, it was because the reigning piece of that equation wasn't as important to them as the winning part of the thing. And I'm not saying that's true for all, but I'm saying that there's a chunk of people out there that probably realized after that second reign, it wasn't as fun, or it wasn't as big a thing for them as they really thought it was when they were questing for it. So I've had the fortune to be able to do it a lot, and a big part of that is who you're fighting for. You know, my lady Anna, who many of you know, that to me drove me for years and years, and still does to this day. Seeing her face and joy in being the queen, to me, is the best of the best. And so for me, you have to have that combination. You want to be the king, and you're willing to be the crown. You're willing to take on that responsibility. And then you've got a partner in all of that who's going to enjoy it and bring as much as you were intending to. That then makes the big difference in doing those. But there, you know, I feel good about that little record. You know, 5 in a row is pretty cool. But at the same time, there was a lot that went into that personally. That to me, it's like, if nobody ever did that, I'd say, yeah, you're probably smart. Just for your financial situation as well as your own sanity, thinking twice.
So, Tristan, back to you.
Cool. Yeah, in looking at it, and you guys kind of touched on this topic, I just wanted to condense it a little bit. You can view winning a royal tournament as being a feather in your cap, like an achievement badge. And it's easy to think just in terms of yourself, where you're a fighter, you're developing, you're getting better, you're taking out opponents, you're winning tournaments. This is the next big thing to do, is win a royal tournament. And then there's the opposite side, which is doing the job for a year or 8 months or whatever the term is when you are Tannist and then you become crown or what have you, whether it's prince of a principality. And really that is a part-time job. So imagine you are stuck now, even though you wanted to get that achievement badge where you trained and you fought and you wanted to prevail in this tournament. And now you're stuck for a year with an additional part-time job over whatever job you already have that you have to do. And it's not just you have to do it, but your consort has to do it. And His Grace Brian brought up a fantastic point, and that's one that I wanted to get to. This was a very personal part of my own journey. Not only is my development as a competitor, which was there was a bit of the feather in the cap. And granted, I'll tell you that I had a bit of pressure from my knight, who said, "Well, you know, you've got 3 dukes in your lineage. You're kind of expected that you should go and become a royal peer." And so, you know, I got sort of that gentle kick in the ass, which was a little bit more than gentle sometimes. But a big part of that for me was, and being single at the time, it was the inspiration of my consort. Did I really want to advance my consort and have her sit on the throne? And in the case, I had somebody who's very special to me, and I thought that this person deserved to be on the throne. She wanted to do it. I thought she'd make a splendid princess, and that filled out the other half, not just the advancement of my own prowess, but of seeing her be the potential of being an amazing princess to the Principality of North Shield. And that was a big factor. And that went the year that I spent on the throne went well beyond that little achievement badge that I had of winning a tournament that was, a very competitive tournament. And for those people that are thinking of winning, just like, these other people said, the job you have to do afterwards is much different than just winning another tournament. And so you have to consider that it will cost you a lot of your time. It will cost you a lot of your money. If you don't have a support network underneath of friends that will help you with your reign, it's even tougher. It's something to set up as a good network of people that are willing to support you and help you. And different regions will have much different support. So know what you're getting into. And I think this touches back a little bit to, trying to win a tournament in a kingdom you don't live in, or in a principality that you don't live in. You're going to have very little support. So, in bridging back, be careful about what you're seeking in terms of, is this a feather in my cap personally, or is this my consort that I want to put into this job? Now, and I'll just share this one little last thing before we go on. I had a predecessor whose marriage was on the rocks, who wanted the feather in his cap, that he decided, or he rationalized, winning the coronet tournament as being his divorce present to his wife, who was basically didn't want to deal with him anymore. And now they were stuck together for a year. And he thought this was a gift to her, when in fact, I think he was rationalizing the idea that he just wanted to be on the throne. And he loved being the rock star. He loved showing up to events and having people dote after him and, oh, your highness, and give him all of the kudos and the cool little trinkets that the crowns get. Meanwhile, his wife, who just wanted to be away from him, now was stuck with him for an entire year. So there's a dark side to what you are giving this other person if you're not in the right place. And it was a lesson. I like learning lessons from other people's mistakes rather than just entirely my own. I make plenty of myself, but I got to see firsthand what a disaster that winds up being when somebody just wants to get another little achievement badge on their own and doesn't really matter what they put other people through. So I'll just throw that one in there to think about.
Yeah, we got a bunch of questions. So
yeah, let's do the questions.
Let's get a couple more since everyone's throwing them out there. This one is we'll throw this. Let's see. I don't know. We'll throw it. This is a yes or no, and I'll throw it out. You get like one or two sentences. Sean, Archduke or not?
No. We already have the duchy, and that requires 2 reigns. However many numbers you put on to make it a archduke, that is the number of reigns that people are going to try to do, and they are going to try to force those things to happen without really wanting to do the job. They want the jersey. They don't want the job.
I agree. Ragnavldr.
He nailed it. That without going on, that's basically what it comes down to. It's exactly what Sean said.
Thorfinn.
No.
That was easy. Brian.
That's a terrible idea.
I'll answer it a little differently. We already have them.
Yeah, that's a good call.
You don't. It's not an official title. We already have them.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people out there who've done enough, and the people that matter around them already think of them that way. So I don't think you need anything beyond that.
Well, and even on that note, I think we probably have people that think that way, even for people that only have won twice, right? Because they've done enough.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, like Brannos.
Well, and it's funny because I never noticed it. I was much less gray. I was much more blonde. Well, not really, but I sure was blonde when everybody was calling me Your Grace, and it was other dukes and stuff, and I was like, I'd always correct them until I finally won the second time, and between reigns was 10 years for me. So almost everyone who walked to me, it's like, thank you for finally doing that, so I didn't have to. I can actually call you that and not make fun of you.
I like the way Brian puts it. He makes it sound like the title of Archduke at that point is really their own name.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you when you hear Brian of Tarragon, that's Archduke level, but you don't need the title Archduke. Brian of Tarragon is that title, just like Jade, and there's a number of other names that just everybody just like bang, 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 bang. We can go, okay, there's your Archdukes, because they don't need a title, they have a name. Archduke is going to change that name. That name is what matters.
Their renown will carry forward for them. They don't have to have a special title or station. Let's be honest. Renown is a lot of what we do this for, right? I mean, you know, you make your name, and if it carries the weight that carries, then it is. And so we don't need to have special trappings to say that. People know when they come up to you, they know. So if they don't, they'll find out. Right. And it's their decision to decide if you're worthy of these type of recognition anyway. So I think that's just such an ego thing. Like, I mean, like, to want that would be so egomaniac. It would be like the worst. Like, it would be like, oh, I don't even want to achieve just now because I don't want to have that baggage. So to me, it's just.
And then you have Stefan von Dresden, who's the Archduke who's never going to be king.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A great fighter. And again, perfect example of renown, right? His name carries weight because of his ability, his achievement, not just, he hasn't won crowns, but everyone that knows just knows, right? You see that guy fight, you go, fuck, man.
I'm going to ask you guys all harder questions on this later of my own, just because I get to. The next one. And this one's just name it off so we can move on to the next one pretty fast. Which is actually harder, winning tournament or actually reigning? All right, Sean.
I actually doing the job. Winning the list is the easy part, and that is not at all to diminish the difficulty in winning list.
Tristan.
Well, I would say that this kind of reflects the fact of where I live. I found that winning the tournament was easier than dealing with the frustrations of politics of the area that I live in. It was nails on a chalkboard dealing with some of the political issues that were going on with the reign. And so as a job, it was not, under normal conditions, wouldn't be very difficult. But it was things that kind of grated against my soul. And training for the tournament, that's just fighting. I love that part. Right. I love the training, the improving, the focus on me and my opponent and the conversation that's going on. That was all pleasurable. The politics were disgusting and horrible. And so we touched a little bit on why I was not drawn into competing into other royal tournaments. That would be it.
Well, and we're going to cover that in a bit. We'll get back.
Yeah, we can get to that. Yeah. But the job itself, I didn't think was terribly difficult.
Right.
Definitely the fighting's easier and the reigning's harder. But I found it wasn't so much because it was difficult. Like the guy said, fighting is what we love. But in a nutshell, if I did not do well in the tournament, short of being an ass and letting Arabella down, if I failed in the tournament, I only let myself down. And that's my own crap. If you fail as crown, you let down all your people. That's what you're there for, is all those people. And if you fail at that, you let them down. So that was always my measuring stick, was, am I really doing what's best for everybody? And sometimes that's the hard part. Sometimes your answers are not always yes or no. You just don't know. You just do the best you can and hope.
Brian?
I can't do better than that. That to me is that was so much encapsulating the whole issue. Is you're carrying a different weight when you're on the throne than you are when you're entering the list, and it's different. So and that latter one is it's harder because you don't want to let down your friends, and frankly, I didn't want to let down anybody. I mean, you want to come away with people feeling better than when you started, and that's a pretty high bar as it goes on.
Yeah, I agree. For myself, obviously it's reigning. I had 2 wonderful reigns, but I really had no interest in doing a reign after I was a count. But I'm going to lead this into the next question just because I can. The hardest part I would say about the rain is that you're gambling sometimes, and you all have to, take a hard look, because you could, depending on what happens, you could be letting go of the dream, because you see some ugly stuff during the rains. You will see the other side of the society, and unless you really understand that part, and if it really, and this is not for you, but also for your consort. So think about that, grabbing somebody brand new and throwing them into the fire, that's a rough gig. Thorfinn?
Yeah, so first off, I totally agree with everybody. Definitely fighting is the easiest part. Reigning is considerably more, fraught with peril. Mainly because imagine, I always try to picture it as like, unless you do like 5 back-to-backs with a guy that you trust in the middle, so that way you have contiguous like kind of policy, right? And since you're also really never stopping being part of the royalty at any point in that period, you're getting access to all the information. So when you have gaps between reigns, what happens is, when you reign, guys, suddenly it's like they turn on a switch, and all the information and all this like stuff that you don't know is going on. Like at any given time, the SA is being sued by several people and all these things like that, right? So you have no idea because you're not part of that group. And then you win, the switch turns on, and all the information comes to you, and you're like, holy shit, I had no idea all this stuff was going on. I was just fighting in a tournament, right? Right. And then it's just pouring at you. Now, the thing is, it's like door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. You don't know which door your tournament has. And so you may open door and find nothing's going on, guys. It's an easy one. This is going to be great. Or you may open door as soon as you win and find out, holy crap, all of the things that I thought would be fun to do are now going to be back-burnered because I'm going to have to deal with this.
COVID.
Right?
You open the door
who saw that coming, right? Nobody
you
saw
open
that
the door and have to serve for a year and a half.
Yeah, right. Or like there's all kinds of things, right? And so this is the type of these unforeseen troubles that lurk like behind winning that tournament. They're all there. And so you never know going into it if you're going to get like the easy start, because definitely something in your reign is going to happen that is going to derail a lot of your activity, right? But that being said, there's maybe an easy start, but sometimes you open the door and it's just chaos from the second you win, right? And hopefully you don't have to go through that. But that's what that is. That's the kind of sketchy, scary part at the beginning of every reign is holy crap. I think I got a pretty good grasp of what's going on. Oh no.
But, hey, I'm going to throw one out here. Just a big shout out to Duke Ronald. He said, the reign is the end of your innocence in the group.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean,
well said.
It doesn't mean it's not the best thing you ever had, right? Could be the best year in the SCA you'll ever have.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of ingredients to make it the best experience you'll have.
Yeah.
You will get tremendous support. You'll get a lot of love and a lot of light shown on you, and it'll seem fantastic. It can be the best thing ever. And when you have that much ante on the table, it can also be the worst thing ever.
All right, we're being bombarded with questions, so let's get them.
Let's do it.
I'm going to burn through these. Everybody, make it short. We'll start with Sean here. I'm going to go up because there's so many questions. I missed one. All right. Do your graces feel about the perceptions that queens do all the real work while the king gets to have all the fun?
Oof. It's sovereign and consort, and as we mentioned earlier, I can't do this without my wife. I can't do this without my consort, whoever it is that I put on the throne. And ultimately, one of you has to make the decision. And if you're looking at a power split, if you want to call that, I mean, you got the 49-51, but I don't make any decisions without my wife. So I really can't. I don't see that either of us really does all the hard work. There's different types of work. I know when we write our letter and the Kingdom newsletter, I usually write that because that's kind of my strength. But you know, we don't. I mean, we divide up the work really, and there's not a decision that gets made unilaterally. So I don't really see that either one of us has more work than the other.
Anybody else have anything on that? I have one thing I have to say. I think I look back, I had to, there's some really hard issues that you have to do sometimes, and I didn't mind jumping in front of those bombs for my wife. But day to day, she is such a better organizer than me. I knew exactly what I was going to do every event, and that was all on her. The second reign, when she was still just finishing up chemo and all this other stuff, she did far more work than I did. She ran around at Pennsic like a mad lady. I have no clue how she ever did it. She by far, to me, she was the king, the queen, and everything else. If I would have had my choice, I would have stepped down immediately after winning and just stood as her champion. So
I'd throw in there. I think it's a team sport, and you know, we go with our strengths. And you know, Ann and I have always split certain things up, the things that she does well versus the things that I do well, and we felt very comfortable with those items to say, okay, look, you do these, I'll do these, and we'll get this job done. But I'll throw one extra thing in there. We did 3 reigns in the East over a fairly long period of time, over 20 different years. We were out there. And completely different courts and groups helping us in each of those timeframes. Having a really strong group of friends, courts and chiefs of staff and people who are in the officer corps doing a really, really good job just makes it easier for everybody. So, and I think that that is a big factor as well, because if you alienate people and if you don't have that extra help and you're shouldering it all on your own, you know, I guarantee you're probably having a tough time reigning. So this is all about, you know, you got to share the wealth a little bit and let others participate in the joy of the whole thing, and you get a lot out of it that way.
I agree. But to me, it just always amazed me how much they put into it. It's, you know, I always felt like I had the easy job. Ragnavldr, you're probably the same way. I mean, you know, in both.
Yeah, the first 2, I tried really hard to shoulder as my share, for lack of a better word. We talked about things that we both preferred to do, things that we were good at, and we would always communicate, of course, but we tended to split the load for the first 2. By the time the last reign came around, which was, 13 years later, by then, Arabella mundanely had done a lot of managerial stuff. Her job had given her all this new set of skills. So I figured in the third reign it'd be the same kind of thing, right? We take this same load, and she just leapt on this whole, I think this is the way we should do it, and this is how we should split things up. Like Brian said, having a staff that's great is a huge part of it. It's not just the 2 of you. That staff can make or break a group, and we've had good people. But this last time around, Arabella was so amazing and knew so much more than I did with that I ended up just backing up, saying, I tried a little bit, but literally I was in the way. I was a roadblock. So.
All right, so let's jump. Thorfinn, I apologize. I'm kind of taking over your job here.
No problem. Okay. No, we're good. I told you I'm not good at that the chat part.
That's all right. You know, and we're working on it. It's all good. I
just got to get better screens.
So and let's do this one as a fast one too, just for the heck of it, because there's not really should be a ton of talk about it. But you can throw your 2 cents in. Let's start with Tristan this time. Should the number of reigns of either the king or queen be limited at a point?
Oh, that's weird.
In theory, that might work, but I think in reality, it's got more problems with it than good solutions.
I would.
Yeah, and here in North Shield, we've gone through a number of different weird solutions for requiring of combatants that they have been SCA officers of some or hold a current office, that they have arts and sciences backgrounds. We've made them jump through just about every hoop you could imagine, and it winds up being far more of a mess than it makes anything better. So that would be my summation: is try not to make the limitations too great on it.
Sean?
Yeah, I think at some point, as we become adults and run out of time and money to just gallivant the country, being king all the time, the number of reigns that you have kind of self-selects, if you will, resources. I mean, just time resources, time, interest, all that. There's I think a lot of the need for that just kind of fades out as you go. I mean, Brian had 5 reigns in a row, but then there was, the rest of those reigns came 30 years apart, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've had 6 reigns over 20 years as well. So, I mean, it's a lot. And eventually people run out of time and interest and or not. But I don't think, I think if you limit it to a certain number, you're going to run into the same problem we were talking about with Archdukes. If I can only have 5 reigns, then I'm going to get those 5 reigns. And
right now. Yep.
Right now. And, you just kind of, and again, you end up, I think when you make an agenda like that, and when you have that kind of arbitrary goal, I think people end up creating victories where they don't truly exist.
I agree. Ragnavldr?
That's essentially it. It feels, I get the concern. I totally do. You're concerned about somebody who's going to, whether through skill or bulliness, is going to take control of the kingdom, and I get that. That's a scare. The reality is we have over 20 kingdoms now, and the number of people who've actually reigned that many times is pretty rare. So it feels like trying to address a concern that's not really a concern. I think the guy summed it up just right. The reality is life puts its own limitations on it. You can only do it so much.
I agree. Thorfinn?
I feel the same. I took big breaks between my like set of reigns, right? And it's because I just didn't really have the drive to go and care, right? I was like, there were so many other things going on. And also, let's be honest, I was working more and doing these other activities. I wasn't a young person, who had nothing else to do but play SCA. And what that allowed me to do is also have a better perspective of why I wanted to do it when I went back to it, right? Like, okay, was it something like I could try and, achieve something for the kingdom? Now, it wasn't about my kind of just, it's fun to reign, right? And so as it moved forward, it changed drastically. And I think that putting a limitation on that is kind of a weird thing. So I don't necessarily feel that, like we've all kind of said, is that I think that there's going to be things that are going to draw people to other activities in the SCA, as long as they're just not like a myopic dork who only cares about their own experience, right? There's going to be like parts of the SCA that keep them there. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the fact that they want to reign, but there's nothing wrong with reigning. It's just that it becomes not your thing you need to do all the time.
Right.
I don't have a lot to add to what everybody else put on this one, other than I think sometimes there's an underlying issue behind this question that usually has to deal with experiences people have had with certain circumstances or certain individuals. And you could ask the question, is there better ways to deal with the problem or why there's a concern beyond legislating a reason to try to block it? And I mean, I think we've all experienced in the years and years we've all played, it's, sometimes it's not going your way, and you may not like the way it's rolling. And I think that's one of the beauties in the group and the activity is it's so broad. You can find other tracks if it starts going too poorly down one avenue or another.
Yeah, and I think I'm with you on that. Is that you know, we do have problem children from time to time, but it's to create rules to stop somebody is kind of the cheap way out. You know, my suggestion to anybody that has a problem with somebody, if they've been a crown before or not a crown, if you don't think they're worthy to fight in crown, then write your current crown who invites these people. If they have enough people that say, I really don't think he's a good king and he doesn't serve our kingdom well, they may have to take a look and say, you know what, you probably sit this one out for me. Thorfinn.
And if you are sitting as crown and you see that coming at you, have the courage to actually address it, right? And it's not easy because that means that telling someone that you probably know that you're fucking up, man, and you need to you need your come to Jesus moment right now. You are not capable of reigning and should not be allowed to. And have the courage to be the crown, protecting your people, doing the oath that you said, right? To protect the kingdom and the people. Well, that's a big thing. So I've had to do it myself. It was very uncomfortable, but I thought it was the right thing to do at that time, to have that person not be allowed to do it because I didn't think they were going to do a good job. So
I'm going to throw this one just back to Sean for a second. I'm going to volley that right over to him. You have to do things that are that are uncomfortable, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And there's some good and some bad to that. You know, there's, I mean, you know, we get this mythology that, you know, that you're the crown and you can do whatever you want. Right. Well, just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing. But there are times when the needs of the people come to you and you hadn't thought about it. In my second reign, we had a bunch of our populace that came and asked us to move our winter coronation out of January because we had for the 3 coronations we had, somebody got into a, you know, life-threatening rollover accident coming home from coronation, and we had like droves of the populace come and say, well, you need to do something about this, and we ended up changing our coronation schedule, you know, based on that. Is when somebody, I mean, like, you know, it is all about meeting the needs of the people first. And I know that may seem cliche, and again, it flies in the face of the mythology of you just can't, you can do whatever you want, but you know, that's the sort of thing that will get you kept out of crown tourneys in the future, is that whole, you know, I'm the king, I can do what I want thing. It's just, you know, besides being selfish, you know, it's just not good for the kingdom. You know, you need to make, like, all the decisions that we have to make. You know, we take the best information that we can. We take the information from as many sources as we can. You know, when we had made that decision to move the coronation schedule, we had no intention of making that change ourselves. And actually, it was our successors who ended up writing that law. But at one point in one of the peer circles we had one of our peers stand up and say, whatever you do it, because it needs to be changed. So just stop talking about it and do it.
Yeah.
So
one thing I'd like to add to that is the difference between the perceived power of the crown and the actual power of the crown.
Yeah.
People perceive, oh, you're king, or you're king and queen, you're sovereign. You can just write with the stroke of a pen, you can change whatever you want. From the other side, having been behind the scenes, it may look that way from the outside, but it's not that way. In order to do something like what Sean talks about, which is change kingdom law, you have to go through the seneschal, you have hoops you have to jump through in order to change those things. That's just the way the society is structured. It's not the full-on monarchy that we present to the world and to the populace. It works differently than that. So if you go to fight in crown because you say, I want to change kingdom law, and I'm just going to, the minute I step up, bam, I'm going to strike the stroke of a pen and I'm going to change everything.
Oh, man.
Totally different. That everything operates behind the scenes far differently than you think it does. So be careful of the idea of your perception being different from reality. And if you want to do some homework, read Corpora, read up on your kingdom laws, read up on how things change for real before you think that you're going to kind of be that way, if that's kind of the direction you want to go.
You're in for disappointment.
You're in for massive disappointment. And boy,
exactly.
you can put ripples across the pond back and forth by thinking you're going to be Mr. All That in a Bag of Chips.
Yeah.
Thorfinn, you got your hand up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, guys, I'm going to tell you what. I think everyone should read Corpora no matter what. What game would you play that you don't know the rules to, right? And so it's a thing that it always baffles me when you encounter people who are like really long-time member of the SA who have never actually read the rules. I'm like, this is the game you play every weekend. You've never checked out how the rules work. And it's something that's simple to do. It's all right there, you know? So to me, that's one of the things I say in like, you know, when nights, you know, when you go to a vigil, right? And you tell the guy, like, here's some words of wisdom, read the rules, right?
Yes.
Figure out how this game actually runs, and then you'll be happier because you're not going to run into all these walls of conception, right? You've decided that these things work like this, but they don't actually work like that. You have to have structure, and the rules are laid out for everybody. So for God's sake, just read the rules.
All right. There's like one more, there's actually two more questions, but we're going to go ahead and hit the oldest one. And you know what? I'm going to throw this over to Brian since he's a guest. This was a great question from Misty, saying, should the crown evolve so that a fighter can champion a couple, so that the fighter could still win crown tournament, but then the couple can reign for them?
You know, I've thought about this one over the years, because there's a lot of people. I mean, you think about it, there's a lot of people we all know who said, oh, wouldn't it be great if, you know, so-and-so and so-and-so were king and queen. And I have a basic problem with the whole concept of kingmaker, because there isn't a lot of pain on the other end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if effectively one person, and there are probably, if you know, looked around the known world in each kingdom, there are probably a handful of people in each kingdom that if that was possible, then you could very seriously see a scenario where people were being effectively bargaining to become the crown, to then have, you know, be the choice of this key fighter or fighters to put them on the throne. And I don't think that feels good, because it's not the game. And this may sound real old, you know, showing my age here, but it's not the game I signed up for. You know, the game I signed up for is this game where we're playing, where crowns are decided at crown tournament, and there is a king and a queen, and to me, that's taking us into another game. Now, if you want to play that game, I could see how that could work, but that to me is not the SCA game. And you could argue, hey, you know, essentially, what about a fighter who's fighting for different consorts? Aren't they kind of essentially doing that? But I'll go back to my first thing of saying there's a pain factor there, which is you're still stuck on the throne, so you better be willing to do the job. If all you had to do is basically hand the keys, that to me sounds kind of cheap.
Ryan, man, you're running yourself out of a possible later salary where you could, you know, somebody pay you $5,000, go win crown. You know, there could be some yearly income here.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Set up an eBay account.
Little William Marshall gig here.
Anybody else have some? You nailed it on the hat.
You know, I'm gonna throw in one other thing on that. I agree. I completely agree with what Brian said. The other side of that too. I think the SCA as it is, there is no greater opportunity in the world, I think, for really anybody to end up in the highest position of honor that we have. And I know we kind of focus on those that are winning the list, that kind of drive that. But you know, in my second crown reign, I was recently divorced, and I wanted to have my second reign, and I ended up fighting for a very good friend of mine, who happens to be our kingdom's premier laurel. And her husband had been medically retired from fighting for years, and she had completely given up on the idea of being queen ever, because her husband didn't fight anymore. And for me, I had an opportunity right there to homage to an entire generation of people who raised me as a child. where I could take one of those people that was so good to me when I was, growing up in the SCA, and I can elevate them to the highest position in our society. So I think we do kind of have a structure where anybody really can end up on the throne. You never know who it's going to be. And I think that is even more so with the advent of the inspirational equality, where anybody can fight for anybody, so I think we have a position where those people that we want to be, that we say, like Brian said, these people would be, great king and queen. I think there is always opportunity for those people to end up there.
If I could throw in one last little thought to this concept, and that is just as a thought exercise, like imagine what the SCA would be if it had allowed this. Somebody wins crown for the first time. They prove that they can do it. They win crown for the second time, probably for their wife or their consort or their husband or what have you, their notable significant others. So they both have their ducal strawberry leaves. But now they would be beset upon by many people that chum up to them to say, hey, why don't you fight for my wife or my husband? They're stricken with cancer. They can't fight in this tournament. They're really great people. Aren't we really great people? Now you have these fighters of renown that are known to be tournament winners. There's already a criticism of people that go and win the tournament repeatedly because they're just trying to gain renown for their own name. And that's, I don't think it's necessarily a totally valid criticism, but it might be. But now they will be beset upon by a lot of people there. And there's a ton of nice folks that would probably make great crowns and consorts. But now they would be drawn towards warming up to people that are crown tournament winners so that they could get the gift of being awarded, a champion who would win crown for them and then hand them the keys. So I think, in my opinion, that would be a political nightmare. It would wind up making anybody who wins crown now have to be subject to people sucking up like crazy for people that they would want to win crown. They would want to sit the throne, or they would want that access to power. That's just my view of it. And if you think of it as a mental exercise, what would naturally happen if we opened that gate?
All right, so we got 15 minutes left. We had a couple other questions, and actually even one that we might talk about, maybe taken to Elephant in the Room episode. So there's definitely some stuff, great questions out of here. It was really a fun episode.
I love all the questions. These are fantastic.
This is the most active group of people. There's lots of discussion in the forum as well. But I want to move to the why not, because you guys all had your chances of why. and to tell you the truth, you probably have, you also explained why not in some cases, right? So let's move to the why not for a second, and let's go all the way back down. And I'm going to throw Tristan under the bus here a little bit.
Sure.
Why not a crown tournament after you've been a Viscount?
Sure. Well, when I did my reign, I realized I got a full perception of the fact that I was doing a full part-time job for a year on top of my other job. And it didn't pay me anything. And by the way, I was actually paying out for it. It cost me. Now, granted, there were, I could take tax deductions on my gas and my travel expenses and things like that. But I was doing a lot of travel. I was spending a solid 20 hours a week between all of the duties related to being the crown or being on the throne. And this was, talking with my predecessors, with my airship. There's a lot of hours. This was, I wasn't doing much else other than my normal job and being on the throne. And when I got to the end, I realized, okay, it was cool to win the tournament, and I loved having my consort be on the throne. I mean, she shone like a star at midnight. It was the best thing ever, and I'm really glad that I did it. But when I looked at doing it a second time, or actually going to fight and compete in crown, it was a sobering reality to realize that a full year of a non-paid part-time job on top of the expense was a high price to pay. And I had to reflect, like, okay, what is my personal renown worth? I didn't really feel like I needed to prove to anybody else how good of a fighter I was, other than if I just would spar with them or I would fight with them, you know. And it came to be kind of that cost benefit balance, you know. And I'm leaving out the whole politic thing, which I was in an area that I didn't care for the politics for. But you know, at the time, you know, I was part of, when I was reigned in North Shield, I was part of the Middle Kingdom, and I felt a great kinship to the Middle Kingdom. One little thing that was a detail once North Shield became a crown is that the Mid-Realm itself had quite a bit of fund for reimbursing the king and queen for their expenses. In North Shield, when we went crown, they did not. There was not a fund to reimburse for travel expenses and a lot of the expenses that went to the throne. So that's just a practical application thing. But it was really the time, so much additional time that was taken to do a decent job and to be on the throne.
So since I'm probably the other prime example, having not reigned more than twice, and you know, after the first reign I did was, you know, it was just on the path to becoming what I wanted to become, and that was, you know, to pass sometimes, and true or not, the hat opens the door to other fights. And you know, when you're standing off the side of the list and they know that you've won a crown and you've done the job, not just won a crown and sat around, but that you won the job, you know, won the crown, done a good job, then that you have a kinship because you have something in common with that other person. And they are more than willing to put that time in because you put that time in. And it opened that door to higher end fights. Not that that door is completely closed to everybody else. By far, it's not. We spend lots of time with other people. But there's a camaraderie in that level to play with. And I think Ragnavldr is going to touch on that one in a few minutes because I'm going to throw him under the bus. But for me, that's where I was going. It wasn't so much about crown. Crown, part of the path. It was a pleasure being able to put my wife there. I could have do it or not do it. It was not a big deal. Tristan nails it on the dot. I traveled between me and my wife. We did like 52 events in our first year as prince and prince and princess and king and queen. So every
Brannos, was it like just a check? Like you needed to get that last check to just be done with that? Like
so it was a check to say, hey,
yeah, I'm done, right?
Right. Not even so much I'm done. Are you kidding? That was just, hey, I did it. I'm done.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, because I was by far not done. In fact, for the next 10 years, I absolutely loved it. There was no pressure, you know, and as much as, you know, we talk about the crown tournaments, but I brought this up to Ragnavldr once. I'm like, you know, crown tournaments is great. And everybody's like, oh my God, the best, you know, hardest tournament ever. I call bullshit on all. It has the greatest end feeling. In other words, when you win for somebody at that high of a level, you can't find that somewhere else. But I got bad news. 90% of our dukes in our kingdom don't fight in that crown. They go to another event in your kingdom, but they don't fight in that crown. When you have a crown of 20 people, you can't tell me that's your best fighting event, because if it is, maybe you shouldn't be having crowns. So, you know, that, you know, to me, there are far better fighting events. Now, pressure-wise, that's a whole different animal. I won't disagree with anybody. But, you know, so for the next 10 years, I got to just drive at being great at something. And then after 10 years, you know, I was like, the smallest thing I could do for my wife at that time, because I was totally helpless, it felt like, was win crown, because she's been wanting to be a duchess for 10 years. And that's why I fought in that one. Not that I wanted to, but that's why I did. And here is the one reason why I don't continue fighting. Those were my two best years as king and queen, or as king. I mean, I met so many people and relationships I've had throughout my life now, and incredible, incredible people. But you give up all of your time with the people that are around you, your closest people. And you lose that. You lose that camaraderie. You know, you feel outside the group of people sometimes that are there for you every day. And so that's another layer. It's not that it's good or bad. And, you know, it just, for me, I have a lot of investment in a local group, and I do a lot of things with them. And it was another job I have here on top of another king job I have, plus my normal job. It was just, you know, it was just too much.
It's exhausting.
Yes, 100%. So that's the why not on my side. Ragnavldr, let's go back to that. What was I going to throw you under the bus on again? Sorry.
Something about fighting. I mean, I made a list of stuff for why not, but you had something about fighting that you wanted to throw me under the bus for. Was it?
I think that was to get to that next level of fight, right?
Yeah, I did. I mean, it's not that royal peers don't fight non-royal peers. Obviously, that happens all the time. And we all did it. But those of us who have crossed that line and become royal peers, we know now that the fights we got and the fights we give are not the same fights. When somebody comes in the list and they have a white belt on, I treat them different. I fight them and I treat them differently than I do some without a white belt. And another factor greater, if somebody comes into the list to fight and they are a royal peer, especially a duke who's proved that they've done it twice and done the thing, there are two things that happen with that for me with the fighting. One is they, unless we're doing something in particular, they're going to get my best fight. They absolutely are going to get my best fight. I'm going to do my best to beat them. And I fully expect the same from them. But what's weird is at the same time, there's also a very, like you touched on, there's a very unique connection you have with another royal peer. You've done this job. You've gone beyond the veil. You've seen the other side of the SCA. You've done a thing that only a tiny percentage of people have. So now you have all these things that are part of this experience. You can stand by that person and you don't even have to talk about them. You both know we went through the same things. We know what they feel like. So yeah, that changes. For the things as far as why not reign, I think the first one and probably one of the biggest and the only time it applies is for your first reign is the dream. The SCA, before you really serve like this, or I've seen those who serve not just local officers, but those who get up, especially kingdom or especially in the society level officers, them and those who reign get to see what's behind the curtain. So until that happens, the SCA is truly magical. And that is a joy. It's something to really experience. And when you cross that line, that magic disappears. Now, that isn't bad. That's just a fact. If you love that magic and you never want it to disappear, then you better never sit the throne and you better never serve on a high level as an officer.
You kind of become the magician.
Yeah, you become the magician. And what you gain after that loss is, like you said, now you're the magician. You're the one who gets to create magic for others. And that is freaking awesome. But the price for that is you don't get magic for you anymore. You get to make it for other people. And that's an awesome thing. But you got to understand, you're going to give up one to get the other. Other things that came up, of course, there's time. Like Tristan said, this is another job. You're going to take another job and you're not going to get paid for it. You don't do this for money. You do this because it's a job. When it came time for our third reign, that was one of the things we talked about. A, do we have the time? Do we have the desire? And do we have the ability? And the easiest one to answer was, we've done this before. We've grown as individuals. We can absolutely serve. Do we want to? And that became a question. Another reason, privacy. Your privacy, especially when you hit a Duke or Duchess level, is gone. And again, it's not a bad thing, but it's a change. So when I go to Penzic, it's a great example. There are people who can say, hey, you know, and our own camp, they'll be like that, right? Hey, we're getting a group together. We're going to wander around camp. We're going to go visit other people. And they get their group together and they wander around. They go where they want. They do what they want. Or the guy who gets up and is like, I'm just exhausted. I just want to get my coffee and get back to camp. You know, he throws on crappy pants and maybe his belt and his mug, and he goes down and he grabs his coffee. When you're a royal peer, you can't just throw on your sweatpants and go down to, you know, go someplace. You can't go from this camp to that camp without seeing a dozen or more people that know you. So there is no, I'm just going to go do the thing. I'm just going to go hang out here or visit the thing. You are somebody. You matter now. So, and again, it's great because you can create that magic for others, but you're going to sacrifice that privacy.
Well said.
Anyone else would like to touch base on why not? Thorfinn?
I wanted to like piggyback on that. You can never unsee the wizard, right? And like he said, like, you know, when you pull the curtain back, right? That's what we're talking about. That's the example, is the wizard. And once you're actually, you're the wizard, you can never see beyond that. Like you know all the stuff. So if the first time you reign and you've never done any of those things, everything is new. So if you every time you win again, you are saying to yourself, I understand the responsibility I'm going to do. I know what's going to happen, right? And all of these things they stack up, like, and so it can become a thing that you can say to yourself, it's unsurmountable now, right? Like where I have work and my, you know, where my cars cause me problems or whatever it is, right? But to have these things, once you pull that curtain back and you see the wizard, you know now how to evaluate where you are at if you are willing to do this job again. And it takes some self-evaluation. You have to say to yourself, like Ragnavldr said, they said, okay, well, we're in a spot where we can do these things, right? Sometimes you can't, right? And so I took about 4 or 5 years off between my blocks of reigns because of the same reason. I was like, I'm doing other activities and things like that. So this is something to think about. Once you pull the curtain back, guys, you know, you can never unsee the wizard, and to keep that in your mind when you go forward, because now you know how it actually works, right? So be smart, be thoughtful, and also remember, it's, you know, this is a gift to the, you know, you're taking all of your time and giving it to your kingdom. If it's about you, I said this before, if it's about you, you've already failed.
Yep.
Right? You're already failing your people. So you do understand you're going to get the accolades. You're going to get the chookies and the little gifts, and you're going to go to Pennsic and you go to fun parties and stuff like that. If that's your motivation, you're failing, right? And you're going to stumble across so many other problems because of that. But if you can then, you know, reel all that stuff back and look like, what can I do for my people? You know, and then I get the chookies and I get to go to the parties at Pennsic and all those things like that, and evaluate that honestly and say, like, I can still do this. Go ahead. This is your time to do it, right? Or at least attempt to try.
All right, so we're going to wrap. It's 9 o'clock. We're going to try to get towards the end here. Brian, do you want to, like, you can continue on this subject, or would you like to cover anything you would like? You are our guest. Thank you for coming on. I know, you know, that you're a busy person, and I can't thank you enough. So.
No, thank you. And it's been a pleasure being on with all of you guys. Really appreciate all the comments and agree so much with so much of what you've said tonight. I would just add on this last topic just quickly. And I'm going to go down the privacy aspect of this. When you reign, you roll the dice and you're taking a chance on your reputation. And we all do that every day in our regular lives. We do that every day in whatever level of achievement you've had. And we all know at each level of achievement, there's a greater expectation that you're going to continue to take care of and make sure that your reputation stays the way you want it to, because that's part of the fun of being in the SCA. You get to create a persona of something that hopefully is important to you, and it's something you want the rest of the world to kind of see. So the one thing I would say about this whole idea of reigning is just do realize every single time you step up and you start that reign, you're starting a clock. and it's a 6 month, or in many cases, I mean, in the East we have 11 months Crown Prince, and then you have 5 months Crown Prince and 6 months on the throne, so almost a full year. You're gonna let your reputation ride, and you're gonna prove every single time you go to a court and show up and do what you do that you're what you promised everybody you would be. And every time you do that, you're tossing the dice again on that aspect. That can become very, very ugly for some people. I seen a lot of people over the 40 some years not play too much afterward because of many things to do with privacy, reputation, disappointment, and viewing what's under the wizard's robes. So don't look behind the curtain if you don't want to see what's behind the curtain. But once you're there, remember, every single time you step up again or you go back in that ring, you're signing up for this again. And that for some people may be a very good reason to say, you know what, it's a couple of other fun activities I'd like to participate in, and not throw throw myself into that fame scenario that can really go ugly for some people, and make the game basically go away for them.
Thank you. That was great. So we're going to wrap it up. We ran a little bit. Thank you. A little bit later. Thanks everybody for coming out and watching. Lots of great questions. There's a couple questions we didn't get to. We're going to post those with the video so that we can cover them there as well. I think we're going to talk we have a meeting next, and I think in 2 weeks, we're going to talk. Right?
Wednesday. Okay. Next Wednesday, actually.
All right. So we're going to talk about maybe an episode on the Elephant in the Room episode covering what does a crown cost? Because that's a big subject. And I don't know if you guys ever heard of the idea of the, shit sandwich.
Yeah. That's it. It's a Callantyre staple.
Yep. So I think maybe that would be a great Elephant in the Room episode. I think it would also help people understand that reigning isn't all what it comes up to be sometimes, and that you're not all powerful. So what do we have next week?
Looks like, according to our list, we're talking about the subject of starting over again, which is taking the first step back into having fun. And I think we're going to cover this in terms of coming back from the COVID lockdown and restarting our fighting training again.
Yeah, and I think this could cover a few other people's questions about even if you're just coming back from an injury, right? Same thing.
Right. Correct.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Hey guys, remember to share and like this video. Share us with your friends. Okay, get us out there. I think that's an important thing to do, and there's a lot of information, including our new library that's launching. So,
yeah, totally. We'll be adding a bunch more content to the library that a bunch of people recommended. So, thanks everybody out there. Thanks for all the coaches here. You guys were awesome. I feel like I'm the spectator sometimes because I just like listening to you guys' answers. So, and I know Sean's the same way. And thanks to our audience, though. They made a whole episode by themselves.
Yeah, I love all the questions. This has been fantastic.
So, yeah, that can't be reiterated enough. We always talk about how much we want the questions, and this was a great example. I think a lot of the spark of this came from people sharing with us their thoughts. So to those whose questions were not answered, like they said, they're going to be up in the post afterwards. They can be addressed there, but don't think your questions didn't get seen by us. This is a group of fairly high level people here, and we've seen your questions. So even if they don't get answered, know that you've been heard.
All right.
And thank you, Vesper, for organizing this whole thing once again.
Yeah, as always.
Thorfinn, wrap it up.
All right, guys. Thank you all for coming and watching this show. This is something that I think we could probably do a whole nother show on because we scratched the surface. If after that, I'm just going to say thank you and see you guys next week.
Stay safe.
Take care, everybody.
Have a good night.